Hey everyone, welcome back to Old World Legends, where we focus on growing the community. I'm your host Mike, and with me as always is Evan.
So nobody gets left behind. All of you legendary legacy faction players out there. We're also going to rank you guys. And just to remind everyone, this is a where is the overall rankings sit in terms of what is it like to play this army? How many different ways are there to build a list that seem interesting and exciting? Are there, do the rules feel good when you're playing them? And do people groan at you for pulling your army out of the box? So that is
Yep.
very much an overall, where do people sit? Which armies would we like to see get better? Right? And which armies, because there's no reason why everyone can't be an S tier. This is not a competitive tier list solely, which where there would always be a bell curve. Everyone can be in the S tier. That's possible.
Yeah. I mean, that is the goal, right? Because
Yeah.
this is our continuing our part two, really focusing on the legacy factions in particular this time, end of 2025 retrospective, overall rankings. Where are these armies today? Not where they're going to be in January next year, where we're hoping
Yeah.
going to be, though we talk about it a bit, is where do we view they are today from a pure overall fun factor, model factor, meta factor, a list building factor, fun comparison. So let's
Sure.
dive in. You see, we already have the rankings up from the core factions.
Yes.
TBD whether or not we adjust those in our opinions as we go forward. But first and foremost, we have the vampires, Evan. So pros and cons, thoughts on vampire counts.
Okay, so obviously they're one of the strongest competitive armies, but
They are.
they're really
Yep.
strong competitively because they rely on a very specific thing, which is I've got Graveguard that have a 5-up regen save, and I healed 75 of them a turn. So it's very similar to the first year of the old world where Wood Elves were competitive because I have Sisters of the Thorn. They fling pillars of fire at you. And that was the only thing they could do. They were a one-trick pony, and if you didn't do that, you were suffering. And if you did do it, your opponent was suffering. And vampire counts are very similar in my mind, where if you don't do that one silly, combo, which usually takes up about 1,200 points or 1,500 points of your list, then it's actually like there's not a lot going on. And not just talking about trying to win a game, but also like where are the themed rules for different vampire dynasties? Where are the more melee focused, bloodlines, right? Or that there's the damage dealing, or let's say I want to build a
Well,
ghoul list. Where is the themes and where are the rules that reinforce those themes? Besides, I've got ethereal,
yeah.
they are unkillable, or I've got guys who just come back to life, right?
Yeah, I mean, you're definitely right about a lot of that. I will say this though, right? Over the last 2 years, this army has gone through a few different meta builds and transformations, right? Right at the very beginning of the edition, everyone was like, "Oh boy, screams are where it's at," and right, a scream spam list, screamer list was very dominant in the meta for quite some time, and then more things came out. Part of it is people learned how to deal with screams better. Part of it is lists came out like the Bretonian Exiles list, where it's like, hey, my whole army has veterans, so I don't give a dang about screams, right? That was something that started happening. So, like, oh, that was a hard counter to that. Also, different communities have put in their own FAQ nerfs to screams in many different formats we've seen, right? In terms
Yeah.
of screaming into combat or not combat, right? Different communities have done this in different ways. So there's been a lot of different things, but ultimately screams are still very good, but they definitely have dropped from the just spam them, I'm going to win a big GT list and such, and such. But then there's also, and I think a big thing too was Pillar of Fire then became a big thing in terms of, cool, I have a Pillar of Fire, I'm going to just direct it, zoop, and wipe out your Banshees, no problem.
Exactly.
Of course, now Pillar of Fire can't be
Doesn't do
directed
that
anymore.
anymore.
Thank goodness, because that was a super not fun mechanic. So that definitely helps that. But again, the Scream list, while strong, hasn't come back. And everyone kind of shifted to that Mortis Engine list in particular, to your point, where they have that massive unkillable brick of Graveguard who are stronger than they've ever been with the new infantry buffs, in particular because you could take them as core, right? That one unit. And then the rezzing, right? Because it's so easy. They're as easy to res Graveguard as they are zombies, is part of the problem, right? And they are, with all the buffs and combos and weapon skill and spells you can get off, they already start out as one of the best elite infantry in the game. And if you get the combos off, bar none, they become the most powerful elite infantry in the game if you get the combos off, period. Like, this just decimates anything that we're running them if you get all the weapon skills and buffs and different things off, and then you could put some vampires in it. So yeah, but at the same time, it's also on the meta side, how many people are still just going to events and still just playing points, kill points, most of their meta events, versus our community and our events have really shifted towards objective based scenarios and different conditions beyond just killing, and also, or which is points denial is a part of killing as well, right? There's two sides to that coin. So that's certainly very true. It is interesting. We had a huge vampire community in our scene to begin with, and it really has faded off as those players have just gone on to other lists that they find are more dynamic or interesting. And I do agree with what you're saying is a lot of the other builds, like the vampiric builds, don't really work. Clearly, they ran out of time. The bloodlines aren't represented. The combos you want to do with your vampires really don't work because they clearly needed to iterate on it more. The necromancer spam kind of gets boring and old real
Well,
quick, and
just to
then like the
point
ghoul
out one
lists,
thing real fast
the
with the
ghost lists,
let's
they just don't
like
work.
if you refuse to use necromancers, okay, because you want to have like a more like a vampire themed vampire list, okay.
Yeah,
Problem number one: the vampire doesn't have access to Invocation of Nehek already, so he can't heal
yeah.
anybody. Problem number two: the vampire the vampire thrall, who you want your BSB to be, he has the stat line of the Blood Knight champion. Like
Mhm.
and the Blood Knight champion's like a guy who's in a unit who you can bring back to life when he dies. The Vampire Thrall is like 125 points for a guy who's now gonna die and not get to be healed because once he dies he doesn't come back to life. And so it's like,
Yep.
ouch, fuck, that sucks.
Yeah,
And
you're right, Evan. I think the main thing, and without going to all of them, this
right,
legacy list still suffers like all the other legacy lists do, in that it just isn't finished. It's
yes.
still the strongest one meta-wise, but it's just not finished, and that ultimately we don't see a lot of list variety out of it. And I think that's where it really suffers, where it still has a ton of units, it still has a ton of combos, but they're just not effective. Now the new common magic items just dropped. Definitely create new different things to be looking at and reevaluating. Ooh, here's some new items. Will this change up my list? I'm not convinced it's going to change up vampire counts play the way they're playing that differently. So they have great models, honestly, and a
Yeah.
lot of the AOS models are people love those as well, right? And they slot in just fine. The new not Graveguard they released, right? And there's
So
tons
the
of really great
model
AOS
side
models.
and the collection and the basically the
Very
art
strong.
side is one of the strongest, I think, because when you
Yeah,
combine the old rank and file, skeleton spearmen, I like a lot because I've ragged on them so many times, but the AOS skeleton guys with a spear, gross. They break so easily. They don't rank up very well. Now, the old rank and file
it's
guys
true.
that are all like monopose look amazing, and Tomb Kings would love to have an update that looks kind of like that. But basically, you have so many collections and options with your model selection, and maybe there might be a little expensive because you're paying AOS prices for a huge horde army. But
Mhm.
people really go crazy with the artwork of this army, and you can make it look fantastic. So that's, I think, probably the best thing about them. Besides just, hey, you can also just beat everyone you want in a tournament, right?
Yeah, and they've been loved for a very, very long time. So without spending the whole video just talking about vampires, right? I think they are still very strong. Their lists variety is shallow, unfortunately, despite having a large roster, but the model range is still very strong, and the lore is fantastic as well. So it's got a lot going for it.
I really think they're similar to Wood Elves in that they're so frustrating to do anything other than the one groove that they fall into. If Wood Elves were in the
See,
same pillar or fireplace, I think it almost. I guess maybe the
here's
models
the
might be a bit
difference.
newer, but
Having the Wood Elf list is incredibly hard to have fun with, both for your opponent and for you as the active player. I'm
yeah,
honestly, as a TO, I groan at when someone brings Wood Elves because I'm just going to hear them complain the whole event about their army just not being up to snuff, like constantly. That's not true with
yes.
vampires. The build
Yeah,
variety is shallow, but the vampire list is very accessible, very easy to
they
pick up
have
and
one
play,
good
but
build.
it's very friendly. They have several good builds.
Yeah, well, they have the
Uh,
Scream and the Terrorgeist spam and the Graveguard build. They have those three options, and they all bore me to
which
death.
is and you're bored because you've played them many times, but they're still a lot more effective and fun than the Wood Elf list that
Sure.
pretty much everybody loses almost all their games.
So then, if that means they get pushed up a little bit, then if we have too many in B, we'll have to do a reshuffle. So hey,
Yeah, maybe we drop some.
stay tuned for the potential discussion about where people go on the tier. Because if vampires are in B, then there's a lot of people in B. All right, so
But
Demons of
at the moment, they're
Chaos.
the end of B. I think
Yeah,
that's fair.
and to be fair, they didn't get any arcane journals, so that's where they're at
Nope.
with like nothing going on really.
Well, we're about to have a whole bunch of those.
Yeah, so we got Demons of Chaos. So they've got the worst case because your legacy army, so you have no updates. I mean, even if you play with
Yep.
our FAQ, it's still a little bit ouch. Like it is hard. Getting your word save all the time is a great way to not have you completely cry at the table, but you still have not that many synergies, and your army list construction is the most complicated in the game as a demons player. And also
There's just no synergy.
the new arcane journal that came out that has the items, you can't have those. So wow, ouch. And by the way,
Yeah.
if you play anything but mono corn, you're also like having a really hard time.
Yeah, and let's face it, most of the roster, like Slanesh, the Demonettes or the Pink Horrors or even the Plague Bearers, the models are great. The newer models that they've been releasing in AOS, they're top-notch models, demon models. And the greater demons, they've never looked cooler. But
Yeah,
it is really hard to not just even with our community rules, and many communities have adopted rules where you say you get your ward saves all the time.
yeah.
It's still hard to just not evaporate just so instantly with this list. It's
And
very
the
hard to work with
demons
them.
have a unique problem at the 2000 points where they can only bring one greater demon. A greater demon is not as strong as a prince on a star dragon, but the high
No.
elf player can play two of those and you only get one. So if you are playing at a competitive event that doesn't have major comp around those kind of things, you've got one bloodthirster who can't buy any items. The demonic gifts are kind of a joke because there's not that many and they're never going to get any new ones, right?
Yeah.
So, and then it overall, as the meta is going, it's like Games Workshop in general seems to be going, you know what, mono demon armies, those are going to be a thing of the past. We're going to have demons mixed in with the other chaos forces. So, if the overall Games Workshop direction is that demons are going to be like blended in with the other chaos forces, that's also a bad thing. Like, I can't think of an army that might not be in a worse place overall than the demons right now.
Well, I mean, pros and cons. It just depends
Yeah.
on your preference. If you're saying like, "Hey, I want to play a mono demon army," that would be Sad Panda news, right? But
Yeah.
if you're like me, who has a whole bunch of marauders and a whole bunch of chaos warriors, and you're like, "I really would like some demons in my army, please," then that's great news. So it really just depends on what your goal and perspective. And again, remember, demons originally were also things that were part of other army lists. So there was a
Yeah. So,
point,
so
I
just
forget which
going back
edition,
to
where
that.
they said, let's pop them out as their own army list. And honestly, demons as a standalone faction in fantasy and 40k and now in old world have always struggled to be a standalone faction. I don't think GW has ever nailed it with demons in
So
terms of
I
the
will
design
say
rules.
people have been talking a lot because I didn't play competitive seventh edition fantasy, but the Demons of Chaos in the seventh edition fantasy had like the Realm of Chaos table that so they were so overpowered it wasn't even funny. Like they were stronger than Cathay, right? And
Well,
I
yeah.
just think that you could bring some not to make them as powerful as that, but to bring the elements of I want to feel like I'm invading hell when I'm fighting the demons. I want there to just be like reality warping nonsense happening like units get teleported to different places or like
This is a solvable problem.
yeah
They just have
there are
to
things
focus
that can
on
happen.
solving it.
Yeah, and I think that having a
Uh,
mono demons be a playable army is something that we shouldn't just let go quietly into the night at all. But I do think
yeah,
that right
but
now, if you're playing just GW's rules, I mean, are they in just D for demons? Is that where
I
we're
think
at?
they're just D. I think they are like this is our first D. Like you have to even just to have fun on the table. You have to use community modified rules,
Yeah,
right? That
yeah.
that to me just puts them in D tier along with everything else. Their saving graces, their demons, and they're awesome. And the models, the AOS models, are amazing.
Also,
That's the
they're
best thing they
pretty
have
easy to
going for them.
paint. I mean, they've got to be the easiest army in the entire game to paint. If you don't want to have to paint that much and you would love to just airbrush everything, buy demons and then you will have a great time.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have
Anyway, let's move on.
Chaos Dwarves up next.
Now they're
Um,
interesting.
yes, it's been a big because the thing about Chaos Dwarves is they very often like win tournaments because for one thing they're probably one of the least populous armies out there. So a lot of times people play against them and they are not familiar with how to fight against them and they get totally stomped and that can lead to them winning tournaments. On the other hand, their roster is quite diverse because they have dwarfs, and I think the regular ass Chaos Dwarf is basically a Longbeard with whatever option you want to buy him. So that's pretty
Pretty
good. I
good.
mean, being stubborn, strength 4, T4 is like that's not bad. I like that a lot. It seems cool. You lose that magic resistance that you might have as a regular dwarf, but you get to have spells. And whenever you have magic, that adds a whole extra layer because when I play, high elves and I pick elementalism versus when I pick high magic, it feels different on the table. So your lore of magics give you improvements there, right?
Yep, and Chaos Dwarves, they're interesting where um, people started Old World or joined, like people had come back just to play their Chaos Dwarfs because they really didn't get them. Now that being said, now they're just boom, they have a big splash in AOS now, and different people are going to have different takes. Some people are like, I really love my big old hats, and that's cool, and they love their
Yeah.
big old hat models. I'm typically a fan of the newer models. That's not true for all AOS models. There are definitely some that I'm a fan of, but I do really like the Chaos Dwarf models. I think they're very good, and I think they slot perfectly well into Old World. I think the question is versus a lot of the other armies where we're like, yep, clearly there are signs that this is coming over to Old World. Clearly this is going to be moved over, yada, yada, yada. They just got a brand new lease on life in AOS, and I wonder if that actually is going to hamper
You
their
see,
priority
we
into
theorize about
coming over
stuff
to
like
Old World.
that, but literally
We don't know.
it was a year and a half ago that they came out with Dark Oath for iOS, and then it's like now we have brand new Marauders with a totally different vibe. I do wonder whether the different studios are actually just like, yeah, do whatever you want, you know, like
It could be, but at the same time, to your earlier point, Chaos Dwarves are awesome, but they have always been a very niche faction in terms of
yes,
the player base, which is why over the years I believe they weren't supported as much as the other factions because GW supports what makes money. That's why there's more Space Marines than everything else combined because Space Marines make all the money.
yes.
So I'm not convinced that Chaos Dwarves are going to get a ton of love anytime soon. Or in terms of if we went through the legacy factions, the order that I think they would bring them over and update them for Old World, Chaos Dwarves would be on the back end of that simply because the player base is very small. But I do love them. They're a great faction. The rules are pretty decent. To your point, they can win events. They are fun to play. They have war machines. They have bricks of infantry. They have monstrous creatures. They have characters on ridden monsters. They have magic. They have the whole. Personally, I think they're more compelling than the basic dwarf army. They just have more variety of things they can put on the battlefield. I think they're great. And I think the new models are really good, and some of the old models are good. And there are some good third-party ranges to support them as well. So they're pretty strong. And now they also benefit from the common magic items. So what new combos exist out there for Chaos Dwarfs?
That's true. That's true. I think
They're pretty
they
good as far as the legacy factions go.
Yeah, they definitely suffered a lot. So, I mean, our community and others out there were like, great, so you changed how magic casting works to be only a +2 instead of a +4 to cast. But what about all the
Yeah.
legacy armies that have unique spells that are like a 10 plus to cast? How are they ever going to get that
Yeah.
off now? And Chaos
They
Dwarfs were
suffer
definitely
from
like,
that.
Chaos Dwarfs felt like the whole thing they do is durability, and so they need that spell to, and at least that's what they tell me that they need. I mean, I'm looking at their toughness 7 guys, and I'm going, I don't know if you need to be at -1 to hit as well. But surely just taking the core spell, the core identity of your army and making it almost impossible to use sounds awful. So I think it's a mixed bag. And honestly, the long-term longevity of getting into this army, even when there are 3D prints out there that are really, really great, seems to I mean, I think this might be the hardest one to place. Where do you put them? I don't know.
That's a
I
good question. Well, they're not S, certainly. They're debatable. I think they have more going for them than the vampires do, and I think people have more fun playing against them than the vampires.
That might be a
Um,
good point, yeah, for sure. And they've got some variety because you can have a lot of the hobgoblins if you want, or you can go full on mechanized dwarves, which is my more the vibe I like. As you know, when
yeah.
I see the Chaos Dwarf army and it's just a single dwarf riding a bull, and then there's a bunch of orcs in the rank and file, I'm like, okay, where's all the
Well, the only
dwarves?
time people are going to groan is when like, who's my Chaos Dwarf list? Awesome, Chaos Dwarves are so cool. I never play them. Here's 2 Iron Demons.
Yeah,
That's
that
that's when
unironically the double Iron Demon and then the toughness 7 guy that also flies, so that 1,500 points of your army is flying or toughness 7 or both
yeah.
is
But again, you could
rough.
make a not fun to play against list with almost any army if that's your goal,
Yes,
versus focusing on the fun. So I definitely rate them above vampires. Would you put them as an A though?
I don't
It's
think so.
hard to put them as an A, isn't it? So I think to your earlier point, maybe we put them as a B. Maybe we dunk vampires down to a C above Wood Elves.
Okay. All right. That sounds good to me because
They're
that's kind
definitely
of where
above
I
Wood Elves.
started. That's kind of where I started with them. Okay.
Yeah,
So up next is Lizardmen, and again, we might have to look at the B section again. Up next is
that's okay.
Lizardmen because I think different armies are in B for different reasons, right? But that's
Yep,
that's perfectly
that's
fine.
the point.
So Lizardmen are up next. A lot of synergy problems in their book. I can't think of an army that got hit worse by we're gonna rewrite the legacy PDFs after they came out than your slan just being here. This is a pile of garbage now. Like that was just rude, just straightforward. And we've definitely gone, and I think rewriting the slan to be I'm a monstrous creature who has to wheel, but I only have toughness 4 and 4 wounds was something that basically said, okay, we have to rewrite the rules for Games Workshop because they're not doing it right. Like that feels the clearest example to me of saying, no, I don't want to do what you're doing, right?
Well, I don't
Um,
know that they weren't doing it right. I think they just stopped working on it, right? Like the
yeah,
whole Auda, and also the same. It's the same with the Skaven, right? With the whole furnaces and the Screaming Bell, allowing them to go into units. They clearly had not finished. In my opinion, it's not that they did it wrong. They just stopped working on it.
I
This
hear what
is
you're
like,
saying.
here's
Yeah,
the first pass, and then like clearly they just like, we have to stop working on this and work on other things. So yes, our community certainly filled in the blanks for them to make them viable and fun for people to bring them, and other communities have done very similar things as well. Some before us, some after us. There's a whole spectrum out there of great people doing awesome things. I will say that before we made any changes in our Owl Legacy Rata, people had brought them once and then didn't bring them again, and then we made the legacy rata updates for our events. People started do show up with them now. They're not going to be as strong as some of the core lists, and that's okay, but people definitely show up with them both at the competitive events and the narrative events and the team events. They're fun to put on the table, and they really are fun to paint, and the old models still hold up pretty well, and the new models in AOS are pretty great too, and there's a lot going for it. I think the biggest problem is people just want the slan to be awesome, and it's just not.
yeah, because the idea of you've got the big brick of Temple Guard that has a slam that's kind of inside it, and he can fling a lot of great magic out there, and he's kind of like a centerpiece to your army where everything kind of swirls around it. Even with the changes that we and other communities have made, that still doesn't really seem to happen. Um, it's really expensive to do, and then they knock the legs out from under you by making the level 4 wizards level 2s. Um, and then the core spells that Lizardmen can use and swap to are unbelievably goofy. Like Monsoon does nothing, and then the healing spell only works on infantry characters who can only have 3 wounds anyway. So why do you heal D3? That makes no sense. And then you don't have the infantry character to heal because you can't heal the slain because he's not. And so you're just like, what is going on with this? It makes no sense.
Yeah,
So
I think there's that, and then
weird.
the Croxicores, again, they suffer from the same problems all monstrous infantry in the game suffer from. They just need some love, and they don't have it, and not being able to, they didn't have the rules to put them in units,
Yes.
and such. And then the Saurus are definitely got a huge lease on life with the latest buffs. But then also, right, we had to make the errata rules for the cold-blooded and such. So they are definitely in a much better state with our errata, but we had to errata a lot more for them
Oh
than we
yeah.
did for some of the other factions to
Yeah.
make them work. The difference is like we errated the demons to make the ward save work. They're still can be very frustrating to play versus lizardmen can actually be fun to play with the errata,
Yeah,
which
and
is
they
great.
actually get to buy
Um,
items, so that's good.
Yep. They get to buy items and they can compete. You're probably not going to win a GT with it, but you show up to a 1 day event, or you're having fun. You could definitely have a lot of fun with Lizardmen. That's
Yeah,
for sure.
that's for sure. And you know what? The poison nerf might have made the really strong Lizardman build work, build not work as well. But it also just makes the person not annoyed to see 70 skinks because if you bring that many skinks, it's actually not that great to do that anymore because the poison is unbelievable how much that changed the game with the change they made to it. So I would say that they overall are probably closer to C still because there's still
Yeah.
lots of problems. Model wise, you've got some nice AOS kits. The AOS kits are enormous. They're so massive that you will have a hard time trying to figure out how to get them onto a square base. Um,
You will.
but that's okay. That's a problem. That's a solvable problem.
But I will say that people are going to have more fun with the Lizardmen than they are going to have with Wood Elves. Vast majority
Yeah.
of people.
Okay. Well, we can. I mean, yeah. Basically, just. I mean, I don't really put too much stock into the order on the tier list, but yeah, I think they're in a similar place. So then we
Well, we'll
have
see what happens. Maybe Wood Elves get dunked
a
down to
lot of
D
Wood Elf
when we're
players
done.
complain to you, don't they, Mike?
Constantly, every week, our YouTube channel is filled with Wood Elf player, and they're not wrong.
Yeah, it's very
I
frustrating.
love Wood Elves too, and I want them to get love in January. But Dark
Also,
Elves.
the core
So
rulebook is filled with so many feign flight, evasive, and all those kind of really cool rules that are really hard to come by in the Wood Elf list, or the guys who have it are T3 and 1 wound and like 20 points each. So you're like, okay, you know. And then Dark Elves, who, to be honest, they might be stronger than Wood Elves, but they're also really really limited in terms of the things that they can actually bring. Every single crossbow bolt you shoot is like a giant turd. It's just they don't do anything. Really sad.
Yeah, it was that was definitely a very iconic thing for the army is the all those repeater bolt throwers and repeater hand crossbows and all that jazz, and none of that works in the current edition of the game. It's not specific to Dark Elves; it's just in general. It just doesn't work for the
So
ballistic skill,
when
which
you
we
have to when you don't
cover.
ignore any to hit penalties and your profile is strength 3 armor bane 1, yeah, no. You will just do nothing all the time
Yep.
constantly.
Yep. Then some T5 just rolls up and just laughs.
Yeah.
You'll be lucky if you get one wound off.
Well, remember the worst chaos can have like every single model in their army could be toughness 5 if they want to.
They're not the only army who can
Yeah.
really focus on toughness. Yeah,
Right.
Beastmen can
And
do it too.
so
And
the
yeah,
elves in particular struggle in they don't have toughness, of course, but they also don't have strength. And dark elves are one
they
of
don't have a
those.
solution. That's the
Yeah.
problem. Like poison was supposed to be like the wood elf solution to toughness. Of course, then
And
it
then they
doesn't
took that
work now
away.
because they
Yeah.
took it away universally. Dark elves also like their solution was supposed to be mass amount of fire power, or spells or different
Or
things, or like
monsters.
that, or monsters. And but their monsters, besides the black dragon is good, but the Hydra and the other monsters are not.
So they're like
Um,
they're suffering from the problem of every single monster in this game that's toughness 5 costs like so much more than it should because they don't really they see the upgrade of like okay, a hydra that's toughness 5 is 190 points. A hydra that's toughness 6 is 210 points. No. Like that's not how that works. Like it's almost twice as good to be a little bit tougher, right?
yeah,
So they
yeah.
definitely suffer from that. And then we've got some really good core spells. I think the characters in Dark Elves are basically the only thing that's really interesting, exciting. You got the Death Hag is fun. You've got the
Yep.
guys riding the Black Dragon, who's got the really scary dragon breath, which is cool. And then
Yep.
yeah, and then you've got Witch Elves, who God, they suffer from the poison change and the frenzy change a lot. Because frenzy
Yeah.
doesn't give you extra attack when you get charged, and they don't, and the poison is
But
now not as good, and they're still
it's the
strength
same
3.
problem you have with the Slayers is you just have
Yeah.
these naked people who are supposed to be fun to put on the table, and they're very thematic and very iconic, and they just die to a stiff breeze. And it's like, no, they don't do anything.
Yeah.
And it's very disappointing
Well, and this is a
because you want
game
them to do
where
stuff.
the only way that you can survive is by having toughness or having armor, and when you have neither, well,
But it would be fine if they could get to combat rapidly and then they could kill things with armor.
right.
The problem is they run into something with armor and they go ting 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 ting
Yeah.
ting and nothing goes through and like, uh-oh, we're in trouble. Right? That's the problem. Like if they had mechanics, the slayers and the witch, like these, they're supposed to be paper, but if they could kill things with armor, great. Like if you threw 15 hags or whatever, or witch elves into like 3-up save chaos warriors or knights and they could tear them to shreds, okay, that's cool to put on the table. Or like monsters, or like, I better not let those 15 witch elves charge me. That's going to hurt, even though I'm toughness 5. Like if they
Right.
had
Or
mechanics that let
failing
them do
that,
it,
then give them enough attacks so
great.
that when they hit something that doesn't have armor, like let's say night goblins or something, that they could just kill like an unbelievably high
Right.
number of them or
But they don't
something.
have
That
any
would,
of this going
and they
for
don't
them.
have any
They
of
don't
that.
have any.
So
No.
your whole army, other than the characters, you're like, well, what do I do? Because my shooting doesn't work.
Nope. Your
And
melee
then
doesn't work.
we can take some 8 point per model spearmen.
Yeah.
Great.
And then the executioners, again, they just don't have the output.
So
It's just
executioners I want to try, but they're still a toughness 3 guy with heavy armor who's 17
right.
points each.
It's the heavy armor is just not. The problem is almost everything in addition, like you need to be at least AP1 to be worth taking, and you
Yeah.
want to take things that have AP2. And so that means 95% of the time you're going to be fighting something with at least AP1, which means your 5-up save is going to be best up a 6-up, in which case there's no point in even having it. You really need a 4-up or 3-up save in this edition for it to count for anything.
Yeah, I hear you, and that's definitely something you see a lot with the elf infantry who wears heavy armor and doesn't have a shield ever in
Right.
versus
They
against
just
shooting.
don't have enough right. And their mobility or I strike first higher initiative, they don't have, because they don't do enough damage. It doesn't matter if they strike
Well,
first.
and,
They're
and
still
just to
just
be
stiff
clear,
armor.
we'll definitely do a video just about how elves are broken in general. But elven reflexes gives you +1 initiative on the first round of combat. The guy who just charged you gets +3,
+3. So who cares?
and the elves have initiative 4 usually. And if you're a human, you have 3. So 3 + 3 is 6. 4 + 1 is 5. So that means
Yeah.
my 5 initiative might as well be initiative 1 because I'm doing nothing. You still kill me before I get to do
So
anything.
let's rank Dark Elves. Where do we put them?
I think
They're
it's a
above
C.
demons.
I think it's a C still. I think they're basically
Yeah.
they might be stronger than Wood Elves competitively, but they're basically just as boring to try to build.
I think they definitely suffer from the list building problem that Wood Elves have. If there's just hard to find viable build variety with the
Yeah,
list.
for sure. All right, and then Skaven is up next.
They're interesting. Now, Skaven are one of the ones that started out out of the entire edition, probably the weakest. I think is fair. Definitely on par than Empire, if not worse than Empire. But what's happened is Skaven are so loved by so many people, so many players, and so many communities globally that our community and other communities have put in more effort into making legacy errata rules for Skaven in order for them to work. So they have a lot of the puzzle pieces, like they have the warp lighting cannons, and they have the rattling guns, and they have the magic, and they have the units in the book, but the book clearly wasn't finished. And the biggest problem with the book in its current state, if you look at it raw, is a lot of the Skaven random, let me shoot into combat, let me just scatter randomly, and just like they're supposed to be as crazy as a whole army of fanatics, right? They're just, you don't know what Skaven are going to do, and they're going to shoot their like. But a lot of that fun factor that existed in Skaven before isn't represented in the book now. So a lot of communities have taken a similar approach of at least buffing them to the point where you can put them on the table or fix the mechanics. Like we're like, okay, we'll write some tweaks to the rules so you can put a unit pushing the Screaming Bale that actually works, which is great because our Skaven players definitely show up to events, and actually some of them have done very, very well. Like our approach is always, what's the fewest tweaks we can make in our community for someone to have fun with this? That's always our goal. Like, what's the minimum bar? Other communities go a lot more heavy-handed. Like, here's more points. Here's more new items. We don't do that. We just do what's the fewest tweaks. So we really just focus on fixing the mechanics the way they should work. And the Skaven players have a lot of fun. It's going to be very hard for them to win a 2-day event, but I'm telling you, they're having a lot of fun, those Skaven players, with these legacy rules. But we had to write legacy rules.
So from the point of view of the communities putting support in to make it better, they're more along like that C or B. But if you didn't have any of that, like if you were playing raw,
they're a D.
So just let's average it out and put them at the end of C, because it's basically just our community support trying to help you out that makes them interesting and preserve some of their love. But again, having like unique and interesting and fun, crazy, wacky mechanics while you're playing them, the core rules don't really have that. Like the closest thing is that the warp lightning cannon, when it misfires, sometimes can spin around in a random direction and shoot in that direction. That is freaking great. I love that. And so, but those things, it used to be the whole book was full of nonsense like that, and it's almost all like sanitized. And that's
they just stopped working on it.
And I think the Skaven book would probably be twice as long if you put all the stuff I want to be in there.
Well, hopefully we will get it at some point in the future.
Yes. I also just mentioned that, hey, obviously this is only for people who are going to our local narrative events, but we have definitely been putting a lot of focus into helping a lot of these armies that are down here be more interesting at the narrative events for people who just want to play the way it's supposed to feel, right? If it doesn't feel the way it's supposed to, that's where you're ending up down here, right?
Yeah, but those are for the narrative events. Those are not for our competitive events. Those are different.
Yeah, and then, it's also giving you a question of, hey, if more people want to show up to the narrative event, then what does that mean, right? But that's a whole
ogres
state of the game thing. So let's talk about the Ogre Kingdoms, which is the last one here. Weird army, I think, because you've got some new items that I feel like actually might work the best on the ogres. There's a lot of like the levitating shield, if you're allowed to take that, is interesting. Meteor hammer or cackling blade could be exciting. You've got like my big ogre Burks is immune to stomp attacks, could be potentially a thing that could be very good, especially when you just have the tyrant and he's in this big block of dudes. There is at least 2 ways to play this army, because Garrett plays I've got an iron gut brick that has 1,000,000 points in it, and that's something that a lot of people do. Then there's the way to play where you've got a lot of the monster guys who actually aren't that amazing, but I do kind of love them, is having like some Mornfang, having the tyrant who's on a Stonehorn or a Thunder Tusk, and just kind of marching around crushing things. It feels a lot better when your 500-point character on a monster can't fly. It actually makes the game be like, oh, this is great. This is a good tactical, interesting game where you can put a couple of things in front of me, and now I get slowed down. And also he's on a massive base, so that also really helps with the vibes. So there's no feel bads for when you bring the big beastie things. I think you could basically bring anything in the ogre list, and there's not really that much of a feel bad, I think. So I think they might be just up there with Chaos Dwarfs. Those have like some really good models and some really good alternative prints to bring as well. And their future, I think, is relatively bright because it sounds like they might be getting a refresh in AOS, which could free them up for a second edition old world release. I could see that happening, especially because they're very thematically and narratively tied to Cathay. Because there's the Empire over here, and there's Cathay over there, and who's in the middle? It's Chaos Dwarves and Ogres. So why aren't they in the game, right? What do you
Yeah.
have to say?
I think ogres are one of those ones that people who love ogres just love them and they really want them to work. And again, we've done a couple tweaks to make them competitive with our legacy rules, but not too many of them, honestly. I think the only thing truly, in my opinion, holding ogres back right now from being a much more fun and much more competitive, a take it anywhere list is they're an entire army of monstrous infantry. And monstrous infantry, it doesn't matter if you're an ogre,
That's a
if you're a
good point.
troll, if you're a
Yep.
minotaur, if you're a croxagore. I love Butcher's Infantry. Everybody does. They're awesome. But right now, they like. I think the thing with the least amount of support in this entire edition is probably swarms. After swarms is
Yeah, I
probably
guess.
like beasts, and then above that is monstrous infantry.
But at the very least,
I
beasts
really,
often have the ability to be. I've got 5 war dogs who
yeah,
just
they're
go
still
run
cannon
under
fodder,
a
so they
bus.
serve
Yeah,
a purpose.
yeah,
So I really hope the next FAQ in January is going to bring us monstrous infantry fun tweaks and buffs and give them some of the buffs they gave to their infantry. So I think that's the biggest thing because ogres, I think, are a very good list. They have monsters, they have artillery, they have magic, they have personality, they have cool models. They're very strong. It's just monstrous infantry. That's their whole identity. So I think if
Also,
they get a
their
little bit of love for monstrous infantry, I think
yeah.
we're going to see a lot more of them.
Well, also their special rule is I do impact hits, which only work if one you don't have like my dwarves are entrenched, so they can never get impact hit ever.
Yeah.
Cool. That's good for dwarves, bad for me because that's the only thing I do, right? And then secondly, you only get impact hits if you ever get to charge, and if you're like if you don't have swift stride, you don't do that very often. Now, was there a core magic item that gave people D3 extra charge range? Because if so, that would actually really, really help make ogres feel
There's a
excited.
new one. There's a
Yeah.
new infantry common magic item that lets you charge. It's like the mini Swiss stride, right?
Okay, yeah. So if you have half stride on some ogres that actually get to make it, that'd be great. I do think that the man eaters have a lot of great options, but they just cost 1,000,000 points. In fact, if we get points changes on every core army, you know what I'm going to tell you, Mike, is that well,
I'm
then we have to do that on them too, which is a whole
Well,
big
we'll
can of
see.
worms.
I'm not. I mean, we'll see. I'm not convinced that in Edition One they have not shown thus far they're willing to make individual army balance changes. That might be coming, but they have not shown they're willing to do that. They've been willing to make overall rules changes, overall balance changes, overall feelings, but they've been very minimal what they've been doing to armies, and for the most part, just addressing some problems. And the armies that need love have not been getting them, and such. So. I'm not convinced we're going to see this for Edition 1. I think they're kind of trying to blaze their trail towards Edition 2 that would launch in 2027. I think we're just going to get more expansions in 2026 is my prediction. But I might be completely wrong and we will find out. But
Yeah.
we are at the overall ranking of the end of 2025. So Evan, any more of these we want to tweak before we close this out for the
I
year?
actually think this looks really, really good to me in the sense of, again, this is overall. So we put ogres into B because I do think that they're similar to Chaos Dwarves. They've got a relatively bright future. They've got really good models. You can get into it for relatively cheaply because a lot of the AOS boxes are just give you a lot of guys, and you relatively easy to paint as well. And Army's good to transport because it's got a big bulky models. You also have a lot of 3D print options or conversion opportunities because they're just big hulking beasties. So you have lots of options to do there, and you have a lot of great units to play, at least try playing in different ways. If you play exclusively against the armies that are very competitive, you might be like, well, I don't have any option that really fights them. But the vast majority of people listening and the people who actually play this game don't do that. So those people will have plenty of fun. If we're looking at the fun factor, I think that's perfectly fine. Now, what I will say going into 2026, I am very excited and interested to look at what are the things that Games Workshop or that we as a community can do to help out the C&D people. I think that's the biggest things I want to talk
Yeah.
about. And those are the areas that I've been focusing the most on for, hey, why are people not bringing the Lizardmen to the narrative event or something? Is there anything we should do for extra rules or something? And that's something that I think that other communities should do as well. Is just why do people not want to play them? They should get to have to play with them, right?
Yeah. And then, so looking at the list here, I think the S tier is pretty strong in terms of just overall fun factor, meta
Sure.
factor, model factor. Seems very strong. The A makes a lot of sense to me too. The B, now that we've fleshed it out a little bit more, I'm not, and I understand why Cathay is being held back. We've talked about that because of all its challenges. Even with the recent Arcane Journal, I'm honestly reluctant for Empire to be at B right now.
It's interesting. Interesting. Yeah. I would say that's a good point.
Now that we see, if you compare them to High Elves, Dwarves, Ogres, Cathay, Chaos Dwarves, I don't think Empire deserves to be in that rank, in that tier.
Okay. All right. Well, if there's, I mean, they definitely have more viable things to try to do. But I think that if they might be down here at C, so we can move them down. It definitely
they have
feels...
a lot of list variety.
But then they have no rules.
Viable or not is a different question. Right. They have a lack of rules and flavors.
So well, like for example, I played a lot of Knightly Order just because I wanted my guys to have some special rules. You know,
you did, and then you just got decimated and got very frustrated. And I've had 3 people in our community who have said, "I'm going Knightly Order," and then after the next event, I'm never playing Knightly Order again because it didn't work out the way they had in their head. And so now I think I'm not convinced Demons are the only one that's in the D tier.
Well, we have ragged Wood Elves constantly, so.
Honestly, right now, I think the end of 2025, I think Wood Elves are D tier. I really do. I think they're in a really bad place, and I really hope January is going to bring them some love and attention that they desperately need.
All right.
And the simple fact that we had so many people play Wood Elves in our community, and almost nobody does anymore, makes me sad.
That's a good point. Yeah, so you had a lot of people who have interest. They've got the models, they got the collection, and they want to bring them, and they don't.
And why is that the case? Because they try 2 or 3 times and then they give up. And then the odd man out, and I know we were saying that they're not as good as... It's hard to say vampires are not better than Empire, or that vampires are below ogres. They don't have a ton of list variety.
Yeah, that's the big... For it. And that's the big problem, is like, I just feel like... So for me, maybe if you're really into the idea of the endless zombie swarm and you guys just like getting resurrected by creepy... gross humanoid necromancers, that's great. If you want to have a vampire in the Vampire Counts army, you are in C tier. Like, it is so frustrating. It is very Empire-like to be that. So it just depends on whether your vampire count in your mind.
I'd say here's why it's better than Empire.
Okay.
Empire can juice up a model to the nth degree and still get punked in a second.
Yeah, that's true.
You could juice up a vampire and a zombie dragon and have a lot of fun.
Yeah, I guess there is technically a dragon, even though, yeah.
And the new model is awesome. I don't see vampires in C. I'd argue put them in B, and I could close this out for 2025.
Okay, all right. I will potentially agree with you. It really just depends on because again, we're doing an overall rating where there's like 7 different variables, and your amount that you care about each of those variables really will change whether you're ending up somewhere else. And we've given you a good overall breakdown of why it might be in one or the other. So there you go.
There we go. All right, that's our Old World Legends overall Army State of the Union for the end of 2025. And we will see where we end up in 2026. It's really exciting. A lot of updates just around the corner, expansion for Cathay, and they're going to be releasing Arcane Journals left and right next year. Can't wait. And hopefully it's the year that we see some of these legacy factions finally become core again. I'm hoping. We'll see what happens.
All right, everyone out there.
Any last thoughts?
I just want everyone out there to stay legendary. That's all.
All right. See you next time.